the living rock cactus. Scattered across the limestone ridges of the Chihuahuan Desert in Texas and northern Mexico, Ariocarpus fissuratus has perfected a disguise so convincing that most hikers walk directly past it without ever realizing a living plant sits inches from their boots. Its flattened, triangular tubercles are colored and textured to match the exact limestone chips littering the ground around it, a camouflage so precise that the only reliable way to spot one in the wild is waiting for its bright pink flowers to bloom for a few days each autumn. Collectors sometimes describe finding one for the first time as a genuinely startling experience, since the plant seems to appear out of nowhere only once a person already knows precisely what pattern to search for among the surrounding stones. This species grows at an almost imperceptibly slow pace, and a specimen barely 4 inches across may already be more than 50 years old, having spent every one of those decades expanding by only a fraction of an inch. Rather than producing spines like most of its relatives, the plant instead grows soft, woolly hairs along the furrows between its tubercles, initially pale blonde before darkening and eventually graying with age. Because of its extreme rarity and the years of patient growth required to reach a collectible size, every wild population of this species now falls under strict international trade protection, and poaching for the illegal collector's market remains a genuine ongoing threat to its survival. Indigenous communities across its native range have historically used the plant medicinally, aware for generations of a subtle disguise that professional botanists only fully documented and named centuries later. The Moon Cactus, sold in nearly every garden center as a small, brilliantly colored globe perched atop an ordinary green cactus. The Moon Cactus is not actually one plant at all, but two, permanently grafted together in a combination neither species could survive on its own. The colorful top portion is a genuine mutant strain of Gymnocalycium mihanovici that completely lacks chlorophyll, the pigment every plant needs to photosynthesize and produce its own food, meaning that without intervention, this mutant seedling would die within weeks of germinating. A Japanese cactus grower named Eiji Watanabe first developed the commercial grafting technique in 1948, fusing the chlorophyll-free mutant onto a hardy green rootstock, typically a dragon fruit cactus, that photosynthesizes on behalf of both halves and keeps the colorful top alive indefinitely. His original bright red cultivar, still sold commercially today, remains the single most recognizable version of this grafted combination found in garden centers worldwide. Every entry on this list represents a genuinely different form of cactus weirdness, whether through disguise, forced symbiosis, or outright genetic mutation, and Garden's Lab keeps documenting species this strange, with a new deep dive posted every few days for anyone who assumed every cactus in a garden center looked roughly the same. Because the colorful mutant top and the green rootstock often grow at noticeably different rates, an older moon cactus eventually outgrows its graft union entirely, requiring the top to be carefully removed and regrafted onto fresh rootstock to keep the plant alive for years longer. The Turk's cap cactus. Growing as an ordinary green ribbed sphere for years, Melocactus eventually undergoes one of the strangest transformations in the entire cactus family, sprouting a dense, woolly, brightly colored cap called a cephalium directly out of its crown once the plant finally reaches maturity. That cephalium, often a vivid reddish-orange, earned the plant its common name for its resemblance to the fez traditionally worn across the late Ottoman Empire, an association strong enough that it also lent its name to the Turks and Caicos Islands. Once that cap begins forming, the green body of the cactus stops growing entirely, redirecting every bit of the plant's remaining energy upward into the cephalium instead, which can continue slowly growing taller for decades, eventually reaching over a foot in height on some of the oldest specimens. Small, delicate pink flowers emerge directly from within that woolly structure, followed by tiny, waxy fruits shaped remarkably like miniature peppers, all produced from tissue. The plant will never grow anywhere else on its body again. Because that cephalium only develops under intense direct sunlight, a Turk's cap cactus kept in insufficient light may live for years as an ordinary green globe, never once producing the dramatic cap that gives the species its entire reputation. The genus name itself derives from the Latin word for head, a fitting root for a cactus whose entire identity ultimately depends on the strange woolly crown it eventually grows. The bunny ears cactus. Covered in soft-looking polka-dotted pads that appear almost cuddly enough to pet, Opuntia microtis carries no long spines at all, relying instead on thousands of nearly invisible barbed bristles called glochids that make this deceptively cute cactus considerably more hazardous to handle than many of its spinier relatives. Those glochids, thinner than a single human hair, detach from the pad at the lightest touch and lodge painfully into skin, often too small to see or easily remove, a characteristic that has earned the species a permanent spot on the list of houseplants best kept away from curious hands and paws. New pads consistently emerge in matched pairs from the top edge of each existing segment, creating the distinctive twin-lobed silhouette responsible for the plant's common name in the first place. The species name, Microdaces, literally translates from Latin to small and hairy, a fittingly literal description for a cactus whose entire defensive strategy depends on looking soft rather than sharp. Despite growing into a dense, spreading shrub reaching up to 5 feet across in ideal desert conditions, a potted specimen kept indoors can take 10 to 20 years just to reach a modest, manageable size. Freshly emerged pads display a distinctive reddish tint before gradually maturing into a deeper green, giving an actively growing plant a visibly two-toned appearance across older and newer segments at any given time. The Rat Tail Cactus. Rather than growing upright like nearly every columnar cactus most people picture, Disocactus flagelliformis sends out long, slender, cylindrical stems that trail and cascade downward, eventually stretching 6 feet or more in a dense, rope-like curtain resembling exactly the animal appendage that gave the plant its common name. Native to the dry forests of Mexico, this species grows naturally as an epiphyte, clinging to tree branches and rocky crevices rather than rooting directly in open desert soil the way most cacti do. Vivid magenta-pink, funnel-shaped flowers emerge directly along the length of those trailing stems each spring, pollinated in the wild by hummingbirds specifically drawn to the tubular shape and bright color of each individual bloom. This species ranks among the very first cacti ever introduced into European cultivation, documented in collections as early as 1690, making it one of the longest continuously cultivated cacti anywhere in the world. Because of that centuries-long history of cultivation and hybridization, botanists now consider the plant's true, unaltered wild range genuinely uncertain, its original native population blurred after more than 300 years of gardeners moving cuttings freely between collections worldwide. Its species name, flagelliformis, translates directly from Latin to whip-shaped, an apt description that predates the more casual rat tail nickname most gardeners actually use today. The bishop's cap, cactus, forming a nearly perfect 5-pointed star when viewed from directly above, Astrophytum myriostigma stands out immediately among cacti for something it completely lacks, since this species produces no spines whatsoever anywhere on its body. Its genus name, translating from Greek to star plant, describes the geometric, angular ribs that give the young cactus its unmistakable silhouette, though additional ribs can gradually form as the plant ages, softening that sharp star shape into something closer to a rounded column over time. Instead of spines, the entire surface is dotted with tiny, woolly white flecks called trichomes, densely packed enough in some specimens to give the plant an almost frosted, silvery gray appearance from a distance. The species name, myriostigma, literally means many-spotted, a direct reference to that same speckled coating covering the cactus from base to crown. Despite its striking geometric appearance, a bishop's cap cactus can take as long as 6 years of steady growth before finally producing its first fragrant, bright yellow bloom, testing the patience of even experienced growers who chose this species specifically for its unusual spineless star shape in the first place. Introduced into European cultivation during the mid-19th century, the species has since earned a formal award of garden merit from horticultural societies specifically recognizing its reliable, low-maintenance performance. despite such an unusual overall appearance. The Crested Saguaro. Among the countless saguaro cacti standing across the Sonoran Desert, a rare few develop a genuinely bizarre mutation called cresting or fasciation, where the plant's single growing tip widens and flattens instead of continuing to grow as a normal rounded column. That mutation causes the growing point to fold and ripple over itself repeatedly as it continues expanding sideways rather than upward, eventually producing a broad, undulating, almost brain-like structure, completely unlike anything found on an ordinary saguaro. Scientists still cannot pin down exactly what triggers this transformation in any specific case, though leading theories point to a spontaneous genetic mutation, a disruption in the plant's internal hormone balance, or physical damage to the growing tip from lightning, frost, or insect activity. Because a crested saguaro redirects nearly all of its growth energy into that widening, folded structure rather than upward height, an affected plant typically ends up shorter and considerably wider than an ordinary, unmutated saguaro of the same age. These crested specimens remain genuinely rare across the wild desert landscape, and their unusual sculptural silhouette has made them a favorite subject for desert photographers who spend years searching remote stretches of Sonoran wilderness hoping to find just one. Because cresting can technically occur in almost any cactus species rather than being unique to saguaros alone, dedicated collectors specifically seek out crested forms across dozens of different genera, each mutation producing its own distinct, unpredictable pattern of folds and ripples. The blue torch cactus. Rising in tall, branching columns across the dry, rocky landscapes of eastern Brazil, Pilosocereus azureus displays a vivid, almost unnaturally bright powder blue coloring that makes it look more like a piece of painted garden art than a living plant. That striking blue tone comes from a fine, waxy coating covering the cactus skin called epicuticular wax, a natural sunscreen that reflects intense tropical sunlight away from the plant's surface, while also helping reduce water loss through evaporation in its hot, exposed native habitat. Golden yellow spines emerge in dense clusters along each rib, creating a sharp visual contrast against the cactus's cool blue body that has made the species enormously popular in ornamental desert landscaping worldwide. Unlike slower-growing cacti elsewhere on this list, blue torch cactus grows relatively quickly under warm, sunny conditions, with mature columns eventually reaching heights of 20 feet or more in ideal outdoor settings. Nighttime flowers, pale and funnel-shaped, open specifically to attract bats as pollinators, adding one more layer of genuine strangeness to a cactus whose daytime color alone already looks like it belongs on an entirely different planet. Younger stems display the most saturated, vivid blue tone of the plant's entire life cycle, gradually fading toward a more muted gray-green as each column ages and its waxy coating naturally thins over the years.